Hello and welcome back to your favorite solo true crime adventure with me, your best friend Madison. These next couple episodes are not going to have a lot going on at the beginning because I'm recording so far in advance and I'm not sure what order I'm even going to release these in, so any type of, even this banter won't make sense. So if you've been wondering, or if this is the first episode I put out, that's why there's nothing at the beginning. Don't forget to check out the website, madisonshelby.com, if you want to see more pictures from the case or if you want to read the episode transcript instead of listening to it. And if you want to get little tiny merch. Not a whole lot going on up there, but I did throw a few things up there. And the few people who have ordered said they really like their shirts. So take that how you will. So for today's episode, I am doing the case of Larry Dewayne Hall. This was the case that inspired the series Blackbird on Apple TV. If it sounds familiar, that might be why. If you haven't watched that show, it's very good. I would highly recommend it. And it's got Taron Egerton in it, whom I love. Okay, so Larry Dewayne Hall and his brother Gary were born on December 11th, 1962 in Wabash, Indiana, to Robert and Era Hall. Their dad was a gravedigger and their mom was a stay-at-home mom, or a homemaker, as they called it back then. So Larry and Gary were something called monochorionic twins, so that means they shared a placenta in the womb. So one baby got more nutrients and oxygen than the other, and that baby was Gary. So when Larry was born, he spent time in the NICU and had cognitive delays from all of the medical issues associated with being the twin born with not enough oxygen and nutrients. They both attended Westward Elementary School, where Larry displayed antisocial behavior and struggled academically due to his IQ. I think it was I think it was in the 60s, 68 maybe. So Gary would later say that Larry made no attempts at any type of romantic or platonic relationships when they were in school. He very much kept to himself. Gary would eventually call Larry evil. Gary woke up several times to Larry trying to kill him. He said, I just woke up out of a sound sleep to see my brother standing over me with this humongous long limb getting ready to smash my skull. And if you're wondering if I said limb, I did. And if you're wondering where the limb came from, well, around age 12, Larry started helping his father dig graves, which made Larry extremely desensitized to human corpses. He would help his dad dig the graves, and then he would steal things out of the coffins, things like that. Larry first got into legal trouble when he and Gary were caught breaking the windows of a store. One of the police officers who questioned them after the incident later recalled it took a long time before we could crack the Hall brothers. They were just kids, but they held up better than hardened criminals. So they weren't giving you nothing to work with. So after high school, Larry and his brother got involved in Civil War reenactments. Gary loved history, so this was an obvious thing for him. He was very good at it. He got a lot of promotions. He made a lot of friends. Larry just sort of tagged along with it as a hobby. Gary would later say that he thought Larry was into it because it was a way to cover his lack of personal hygiene and to act upon his violent urges. He said that Larry had virtually no hygiene. He smelled. He grew these huge mutton chops, which he claimed were for the reenactments, but Gary said he wouldn't be surprised if he grew it to cover up the acne on his face. He also said he wasn't just dark and mysterious, antisocial kid you see, you wonder what's up with him. He was very obnoxious and very quick to get angry. When talking about the reenactments, Larry would say that I met a lot of new friends during that time period. I was able to travel around and meet them at the battlefields and go on tours and stuff. So Larry is maintaining, he had a good time doing this. It wasn't for any type of ulterior motives. But another weird thing that happened was the places that Larry would travel to do reenactments, because it was a traveling thing. They would go sort of all over. The places where Larry would be ended up having a girl go missing at the same time. So he would go to these cities, and then eventually a girl would be missing from those cities and at near the dates that he was there. However, he is not linked to any of these alleged murders or disappearances until authorities discovered the body of 15-year-old Jessica Roch from Georgetown, Illinois. So Jessica disappeared on September 20th, 1993, while riding her bike on Mill Street, which is east of Georgetown. Jessica's mom wants people to remember the pretty, shy girl who loved to watch Gone with the Wind and always had her nose in a book. She was close to her older sister, Mindy, and her younger brother, Chris. Her mom would say Jessie was just starting to become a young woman and talk about what she might want to do. She wanted to be a pilot, maybe. She wanted to fly big airplanes, commercial airplanes, jet planes. They said she didn't want to fly like little tiny planes. She wanted to go as fast as she could. So they had never heard of Larry Hall before. But when Jessica's body was discovered in November of 1993 in a cornfield, some witnesses came forward. These witnesses recalled a van driving around town and the man inside trying to pick up girls. So the girls had told their parents about it, and one of the parents had gotten a license plate. But, they assumed nothing happened. So when Jessica's body was found and they realized, maybe something did happen, one of those parents turned over the license plate that they had gotten from their daughter, and the van was linked to a man named Larry Hall. This is the first they had ever heard of him. So they bring Larry in to question him. Gary Miller, the chief investigator for the Vermilion County Sheriff's Office in Illinois, brought Larry to the police station for questioning and showed him a picture of Jessica. Gary said when he showed him the picture that Larry immediately flinched. He turned, put his hand up over his face like he didn't want to see the picture, and then he told Gary that he didn't think he'd ever seen that girl before. So he has a very obvious, visceral reaction to seeing this photo of Jessica, and then is like, nah, I've never seen her. However, and this will be a theme of Larry's, you will come to find out, he soon confessed to the kidnap and murder of Jessica Roch. He told the investigators he raped Jessica, led her to the woods, and then strangled her from behind, so he didn't have to see her face as she died. Larry would say, I laid her up against a tree and put a belt around her neck and she stopped breathing. Larry also said he had been near the campus of Indiana Wesleyan University where Tricia Reitler was last seen. Larry would say, I was over there because I needed to be with somebody. There was a small shopping center and I had a van. He had raped and strangled a girl there too, he said, and he identified his victim by pointing to a picture of Tricia Reitler. Tricia Reitler was a girl that went missing before Jessica Roch. She was studying at her college dorm. She went to take a break and walked to the store about a half a mile away from her dorm and intended on coming right back, but she never made it. The night of Tricia's disappearance, her father recalls almost intuitively feeling unwell. He said the phone call came a little bit after midnight. He said, I wasn't feeling well that night, just kind of lying on the couch. He said he answered the phone and a police officer's voice said, do you know where your daughter is? Her dad said that Tricia was a fighter. She was strong. She was a small girl, but she was very determined. We knew that she was not gone by her own doing. They also said she was also very responsible. So they knew something was wrong right away. She went to a small Christian college. She did her own laundry by hand to save money because she was so grateful for the sacrifices her parents made to let her go to college that she wasn't going to waste any money or any of this opportunity. Hand washed her own clothes. So after they get the phone call, her parents drive to her dorm, and then they were informed that her bloody clothing was found, and her father said he just knew that she wasn't alive anymore. So when Jessica went missing and was found the way that she was found, just 6 months after Tricia's disappearance, the Reitlers sort of had a renewed sense of hope that they were connected and would be able to find the person who did this to Tricia. And then they get Larry Hall in the room, and he tells them about Jessica. He points out the picture of Tricia, like I said. And then he said, all of the girls looked alike. I can't remember all of them. I picked up several girls in other areas, but I can't remember which ones I hurt. So they think they have him. They finally have someone tied to at least 2 disappearances and murders, and it sort of sounds like there could be way more out there that possibly he could be connected to. However, the next day, he recanted his entire confession. He was talking to Gary Miller, and he said, I was just telling you about my dreams that didn't really happen, which is a big theme in the show. He's sort of and it's a big theme in the real case. He will confess and recant dozens of times. And he says in the show, those were dreams I'm telling you about, I think those were all dreams. So they were able to keep him in prison because there was some evidence in his van tying him to Jessica and Tricia. There were notes, according to CNN, in his van that said, seen joggers and bikers, many alone, checked colleges, parks, seen some prospects. There was a list of items to buy at the hardware store and detailed instructions. Buy 2 more plastic tarps, cover all floor and sides of van, no body contact, buy condoms, buy 2 more leather belts, find one now. Investigators found newspaper clippings about Jessica Roch and Tricia Reitler. Amid the pornographic photos, they say that Larry had altered. Gary Miller said he had drawn what looked like a rope or a belt around the neck of one of the people, and on the left side of one of the pictures, on their mouth, he had drawn blood. So Larry's telling the investigators, because remember, he recanted his confession, so now he doesn't want to be tied to these. He told investigators that he staged all of that evidence to gain attention and to feel important, because he was sort of antisocial, not really out there. So he's like, I just wanted attention. I just wanted people to talk to me. So I planted all of that evidence in my van so that I would feel important when you guys came and talked to me. So Larry had mentioned that all the girls looked the same and that he picked up several other girls in several other places. He would be linked to several other disappearances and murders over the country. Police think he started doing this in the very early 80s. However, Gary, Larry's brother, claimed that when talking to Larry, his first murder may have been earlier than that. He confessed that his first killing was in 1979. Gary said that Larry admitted to killing a hitchhiker and burying the body near the Mississauga River, and then said that he had confessed to 15 murders. He said he had confessed to murders taking place in California, Colorado, Illinois, Missouri, and Wyoming. Gary said, I don't believe my brother is making any of this up. He has way too many specific details to be making all of this up. Gary said that he was attracted to young, long, dark-haired women, 5'3" to 5'5", with slender, athletic builds. So I'm going to go through the disappearances and murders that they think are linked to Larry. So on June 28th, 1982, 19-year-old Naomi Lee Kidder left Buffalo, Wyoming with several friends to go to Rawlins, Wyoming. They stayed at the Travel Lodge until June 29th, 1982, when Kidder left to go hitchhiking. This was the last time she was seen alive. She was only 4'11" and about 100 pounds, so she is a very small woman. Her nude remains were found in Natrona County on September 10th, 1982, in what appeared to be a partially dug grave, and she was finally identified on March 10th, 1993, so that's almost a decade after she was murdered, and she was identified through her dental records. Her cause of death was a ligature strangulation. They think Larry was involved because he was arrested. After he was arrested, they found a document that he had with her name written on it. On September 6, 1986, the body of a young woman was found nude, strangled, and sexually mutilated a day after her death in a cornfield near Summerfield, Illinois. The unidentified woman was referred to by detectives as the Summerfield Jane Doe and was buried in the Mount Hope Cemetery under a gravestone that said Jane Doe, known only to God. She wasn't identified until 2007 after her body was exhumed after authorities realized they had made a mistake fingerprinting her. And her arrest record came up in the database after they correctly got her fingerprints. She was 26-year-old Eulalia Malia Chavez, they call her Lolly, of Palo Alto, California. Larry confessed to her murder in a letter to a news station. They questioned Larry and took his DNA to try and tie him to the crime scene, but it was inconclusive. Linda Lynn Weldy, Little Linda, was 10. She disappeared on February 24th, 1987, after she was dropped off by her school bus near her home on McClung Road in LaPorte, Indiana, at about 3:30 p.m. According to police, her bus driver and other children saw her walk toward the family mailbox as she did each day. The bus drove off, and Linda was supposed to walk about 250 yards down her driveway to her house, which was hidden by trees. She never made it home. Her body was found 3 weeks later on March 17th along an abandoned railroad track 9 miles away from where she was last seen on County Road 500 South near Kingsbury. She had been manually strangled. According to investigators, Larry was in the area at that time. However, authorities in that area think it's more likely someone from that area did it and not Larry Hall. So that one is sort of up in the air. The FBI thinks Larry was definitely involved, but the police station where they live sort of thinks it more than likely it was someone who lived there. At around 2 p.m. on June 4th, 1987, 16-year-old Wendy Lewis Felton stayed home in Marion, Indiana, when her older sister drove their parents partway to an airport for a business trip that afternoon. When her sister returned home at 5 p.m., Louise was gone, but all of her stuff was left behind. At first, she was thought of as a runaway, even though they said she left her entire purse and her favorite shoes behind, which is like a theme. If you're a woman and you go missing, it's just assumed like you ran away. But it was eventually changed to endangered and missing. At that time, her home was less than 25 miles from Wabash, which is where Larry lived at the time, and is located only a few miles away from a reenactment site that he often visited. Detectives have not ruled out Hall as a suspect, I think based on location alone. Because her body was never found, they don't know if she was strangled or assaulted like the rest of Larry's victims. So it's not like her body was found with a similar MO as the other bodies that he had strangled or, something like that. They don't have anything to go off of in that case. They just think based on location, this is very likely that it was one of Larry's victims. 19-year-old Paulette Sue Webster was last seen walking home from a friend's house in Chester, Illinois at 11 p.m. on September 2nd, 1988. Again, they originally thought she was a runaway, even though Paulette left behind her license, purse, job, her pets, all of her personal possessions. Definitely ran away. That just makes me so angry. In 2011, Larry Hall sent a letter to author Christopher Hawley Martin, a Wabash native who wrote a book about Larry, in which he claimed responsibility for Webster's murder. Larry claimed that Paulette was taken from the main east and west roads through Chester near a mobile home park. He then claimed he took Paulette to a remote location where she was kept and sexually assaulted for several hours. Larry said he either threw her in the Mississippi River or buried her. He wrote, "If I did it, I would have put her in a river or in a field." On July 1st, 1991, Michelle Lee Dewey, a 20-year-old single mother, was found strangled in her second-floor apartment on South Downey Avenue in the Irvington section of Indianapolis. Her 18-month-old son was in a back bedroom with the door wedged shut. He was unharmed. It would be her babysitter that arrived at her house and discovered her body. So Larry's brother, Gary, I feel like I have to keep specifying because Gary Miller is the investigator. Gary Hall is his brother. Gary Hall claimed that Larry had confessed to killing Michelle. Gary used to visit Larry in prison a lot and try and get him to confess to these murders to give the families closure. Like every time he went there, he would tell Larry, you have to say something. So Gary said that Larry confessed that he was in the Irvington area of Indianapolis on July 1st, 1991. Larry, according to his brother, had driven to Irvington to check out a blue Dodge van listed in a Trader newspaper. Police were able to see an old ad in the Trader in June of 1991 for a 1980 blue Dodge van. So that part is true. There was a van for sale in Irvington. Gary said that Larry drove by Michelle Dewey's house. She was laying out. He then barged into the door of the home, strangled Michelle Dewey, and left when the young boy began to scream and cry. Larry said it freaked him out, Gary said. And then he reportedly took a record album from Michelle's house as a souvenir. Gary said that Larry told him. Authorities suspect that Larry, like he said, had spotted Michelle sunbathing in the backyard. Michelle's aunt would later say that Michelle was in fact sunbathing in the backyard that day. I believe they tried to extract DNA from under her fingernails, but that was almost 10 years ago now when they did that. So 2014, 2013. And I couldn't find any update if they had found Larry's DNA under her fingernails. So I'm not quite sure what goes on there, but that's another one he had confessed to. 22-year-old Lori Jean Deppes was seen entering her gray 1984 Volkswagen at the Fox River Mall in Grand Chute, Wisconsin on August 19th, 1992, around 10 p.m. She apparently arrived at her boyfriend's apartment complex sometime between 10:15 and 10:30. Lori's boyfriend had been waiting in his apartment with his sister and a friend. I had seen her early in the day, and she had gone that day and bought a present for me that she was really excited to give to me. We heard her car pull up, and after a couple of minutes, we were thinking, where is she? It went from 1 minute thinking maybe she's goofing around to something is not right. They saw her empty car larked in the parking lot. They saw her empty car locked in the parking lot with a styrofoam cup on the hood and began looking for her. Eventually, they called the town of Menasha Police Department. Her purse and all of her overnight stuff was still inside of her locked car. The police at first said there was no evidence that she was taken forcibly, which how could you really even tell? And then they polygraphed all of her friends and her boyfriend and listed foul play as possible. I don't know how many people often run away without any of their stuff, but police seem to think it happens all the time. In 2010, Larry, who was first identified as a suspect in her disappearance in 1995, because, again, they found a notebook in his car that named the mall where she had worked and her first name. He finally admitted to abducting and murdering her in 2010. He claims that he saw her when she was working at the Fox River Mall and followed her to her boyfriend's apartment where he kidnapped and later killed her. And she was actually in town for a Civil War reenactment, police had said. Investigators searched the area where Hall said he had buried her body, but they were unable to locate either her body or any other tangible proof of the claim that he murdered her. And then the last two he was officially linked to were Tricia Reitler and Jessica Roch, which I went into detail about earlier. So the problem is, Larry will say all of these things, and he will immediately recant his statement. And then there's nothing physical tying him to these murders, so they have no way to charge him for anything. He's in jail on, like, a very thin thread right now. Like, there's not much keeping him there. So the FBI has this idea. James Keene, Jimmy Keene, became involved in the marijuana business as a teenager. He was charged in 1996 by the FBI and the DEA on a conspiracy charge. Prior to his sentencing, Jimmy refused and declined any cooperating deals that would require him to act as an informant against anyone. He's like, I'm not doing anything of the sort. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. So, and this is who Taron Egerton plays in Blackbird. So Jimmy Keene was prosecuted by the same man who originally prosecuted Larry Hall. I think Gary Miller. He did both of these, so he's very familiar with both of these people. So 7 months into Jimmy's sentence and getting nowhere with Larry, they approached Jimmy with a different kind of deal. They want to transfer Jimmy to Larry's prison and get him to try and befriend Larry and get him to, like, casually confess to these crimes so they can start finding these girls. If he can do that, they will commute Jimmy's sentence immediately and erase it. That's how badly they want Larry Hall. They'll be like, this will be like it'll never happen. The second you tell us, you'll be out of prison walking in the streets with no record. Like I said, they only had Larry in prison right now for the murder of Jessica Roch, and he had recanted that statement, which meant that his lawyers had filed an appeal about him being in prison. And they were genuinely worried that Larry could win his appeal, and they know he's a danger, and they know he will kill again. So they're very stressed when they make this deal. This is going to be kind of short, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know what order I did this in, but I have two kind of long ones, so I'll make it up to you. So Jimmy is very reluctant to take this deal. Not only did he never want to be an informant, he would be transferred to a maximum security prison full of dangerous people. And if they figured out he was a snitch, they would probably kill him in this new prison. But he did end up taking the deal. This is what the show Blackbird is about. This is like where it starts. It starts with Jimmy getting arrested and then him trying to get these confessions out of Larry. So Jimmy does end up befriending Larry and getting him to make confessions, according to CNN. Larry did admit to Jimmy that he had killed Tricia, but he didn't say where her body was. It was said that Larry would confess to other murders and give gruesome details that only the killer would have known. So, like, Larry is telling Jimmy these things, and Jimmy is telling the FBI these things, and the FBI is like, there is no way he would know that if he didn't do it. Because Larry thinks he's talking to a friend. So, of course, he's not under the pressure of, like, an FBI interrogation where he is making stuff up. He's, like, just giving these little tiny details that he thinks are unimportant, but are really extremely important. Sometime later, Jimmy found Larry in the prison workshop with a map. He was carving wooden falcons and placing them, like, around the perimeter of the map. Jimmy Keene would say, like, it was a map with red dots over Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And when Jimmy walked in, he covered it up really fast. And then Larry told Jimmy that the falcons were placed on the map to watch over the dead. So having this information and knowing what he knows about his deal, Jimmy assumes that he would be released immediately once he left the wood shop and notified the FBI. So Jimmy sees this map and puts two and two together. If you ever put two and two together, the red dots on the map are where Larry had, like, assaulted or buried the bodies of these women. So this is all clicking in Jimmy's head. And he's thinking, in like 15 minutes, I'm going to get out of prison anyway. So I don't care. And he blows up on Larry, stops pretending to be his friend immediately. Jimmy said, I told him he was a sicko. I told him that he was insane. I said that you are one of the most despicable forms of human life on this planet. Jimmy said people probably wouldn't understand the mounting pressure. The kettle is ready to boil over at any time, and it just felt good to unload on this guy. He would later say to Dateline. And I mean, imagine having to hear all these details about these murders and whatever else Larry had been spending his time telling Jimmy, and Jimmy having to pretend to be understanding and be his friend that whole time and not be able to, like, be disgusted or lose his mind at the things that he has to hear. So Jimmy not only blew his cover, but the way he was yelling at Larry landed him in solitary confinement. And by the time he was released from solitary, which was 2 entire weeks later, the map and the Falcons were gone because he had no way of reaching the FBI to tell them about it because nobody would listen to him that he was an informant. He's like, I am an informant for the FBI. You have to tell the FBI this, and this about Larry. Nobody ever did that. And then he spent 2 weeks. So all that stuff was long gone because Larry obviously put it together that Jimmy was an informant once he started blowing up on him and, like, Jimmy is not his friend. Jimmy had a lot of regrets over losing his shit on Larry. Immediately, he said, I'm disappointed I didn't wait at least a day or two. I should have waited a few more days. I wish I could have done more for the families, but I did all I could do, and I feel in my being that I did all I could do. So despite that, the information Jimmy was able to give the FBI proved to be enough to keep Larry in prison. So Jimmy's deal was honored, and he was released from prison with a clean slate in 1997 after serving 17 months. Since he was in prison, Larry Hall has confessed to more than 15 murders and then recanted each confession. He also claimed in an interview with the Associated Press in 2011 that he had abducted 39 women between 1980 and 1994. Larry Hall is now 60 years old and incarcerated at Federal Correction Institute in Butner Medium in North Carolina with no possibility of parole. It is believed that Larry isn't just responsible for the 21 murders referred to in Blackbird, but he could have committed more than 50 murders, which would make Larry Hall one of the most prolific serial killers of all time in the United States. But again, there's, like, nothing tying him to a lot of these. All of them, probably. In 2010, Jimmy Keene wrote an autobiography, In With the Devil, a Fallen Hero, a Serial Killer, and a Dangerous Bargain for Redemption. He wrote it with this guy named Hill Levin. So Levin interviewed both Gary and Donna Reitler. There are a lot of Garys going on in here. Gary Reitler is Tricia's dad. Gary Miller is the investigator. And Gary Hall. That's a lot of Garys. Anyway, the guy, Levin, who helped Jimmy write his book, interviewed both Gary and Donna Reitler for the book. And in the interview, Donna shared that all she wants is someplace to bring flowers for their daughter because they still don't know where Tricia actually is. In the acknowledgments for the book, Levin thanked Gary and Donna for their incredible kindness to me and for their willingness to reopen the darkest chapter of their lives. Donna told Cleveland.com in 2009 that I'm not interested in punishment or retribution. I just want to find out where my daughter is and bring her home. 16 years later, we're still sitting by the phone waiting for information. The constant up and down is painful. We've never been able to grieve. Like I said, the book that Jimmy Keene was writing would be the book that the Apple TV series Blackbird was based off of. It's only 6 episodes, like 6 full episodes, so the story starts and ends. There's no, like, cliffhanger part 2. It is very good. The man who plays Larry Hall looks just like him. His name is Paul Walter Hauser, and he ended up winning an Emmy for his role of Larry. And Blackbird also won an Emmy as a show for Best Cinematography that did not want to come out. It's very good. It's like 6 episodes is like a great length for something like this. A movie's too short, but like a TV series is too long. A nice short limited series. It's very good. The acting is fantastic. And it sort of like fills in, well, not fills in because it's like not entirely true, but the part that I didn't get to talk about because there wasn't much in there about Jimmy being in prison with Larry, that relationship is very interesting to watch play out. And I think Jimmy was involved in like the production of this show, so some of it is reflective of his experience, but it is very interesting. It's like one of those times where you almost feel bad for Larry because of how well he is played and like how this relationship plays out, but then you remember that like Larry Hall isn't an actual monster to society. So let me know if you watched that. If you do, let me know what you thought, because I really enjoyed it. And I'm sorry that was so short, but I do have a couple long ones for you that I honestly thought about splitting into 2 parts, but I didn't think it was worth it, so I did not do that. So hopefully that makes up for this one. And hopefully you liked it anyway. Short, sweet, to the point. Just how we like it. And I will see you next week. Hopefully I'm getting all of your Patreon episodes out Like I said, those are hard for me to research just because it's so hard for me to find the perfect length of a short episode to do. So if you have any cases that you think are kind of short, please go to the website, madisonshelby.com. There's a form to suggest a case. You just fill that all out. It goes right to my inbox, and I can put it right on my Google sheet of topics. But yeah, short episodes are very hard for me too. Like actual short episodes. Like I can't believe this was this short because it was so much research. You know what I mean? So if you have a case that you think is interesting but might not be enough for a full-length episode, I would absolutely love to hear it because that is my big struggle. So hopefully I'm getting those out on time for you because I didn't have too many of those in the bank. And I'm getting my tonsils taken out in a few days at the time of recording, and I don't know what that's going to be like. What if my voice changes and I don't sound like this anymore? Might be kind of good. I got a lot of complaints about the sound of my voice. Okay. Well, I will see you next week, hopefully Monday, hopefully every Wednesday and Monday for the foreseeable future. And I hope you enjoyed it and check out the website. Thank you. Bye.